And we're live. Welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of the Wheelie Podcast, the first episode of 2026. I'm your host, Mike Atoll, and I'm joined again by Electrek's Seth Weintraub. How's it going, Seth?
I'm good.
Awesome. And we are starting off the year with a quite diverse lineup of stories. These are the biggest e-bike stories from the last 2 weeks. And we're going to cover everything from some new models that have been introduced, a pretty neat semi-recumbent electric trike. We're going to talk about what happens when e-bikes get pushed into super high mileage. We've got a sort of sad closing watch on Rad Power Bikes as we count down the days to when the company might be going out of business. We've got a bit of a cool sort of physicsy story about how electric bikes can actually do regen. They just need to be designed slightly differently. We're going to talk about some new laws coming out of California for e-bikes, as well as take a look at a few non-e-bike vehicles, from electric dirt bikes to electric scooters. But where we're going to start it off with this week, Seth?
All right. This ultra portable electric trike could keep more people riding for years longer.
Yeah, this is a really neat model. It's called a semi-recumbent style. So this is a Delta trike. That means it's got two wheels in the rear, but it's not a typical sort of upright style like we're used to, a electric XP trike, a rad trike, that sort of thing. It's much more leaning back. Not totally like a recumbent. You're not laying down, but it's got that like super captain's chair, feet way out in front of you kind of stance to it, and the handlebars just go way back. It almost looks like a tiller on a boat outboard or something. This is actually from a Australian company. This is called the Chill Trike, and I think it's probably aptly named because you definitely look pretty chill, just like leaning back on this big old trike. Now, it's definitely meant for older riders, and that's who they're really positioning it with the marketing. It's like a get back into riding, or stay on a bike longer. Maybe like you've been a lifelong cyclist, or you've been into e-bikes for a while, but you've reached the point where you might not have the leg strength, you might not have the balance, that sort of thing. So that's what this is designed for, is to be as accessible as possible and to keep people on trikes longer. Though, if you ask me, I don't think it's just for older folks the way that their marketing is very heavily leaning that direction. I think certainly anyone with accessibility issues, but just in general, I mean, this looks like it would be super fun to ride for me. Like, I don't need a trike, but I enjoy them sometimes just because, they're easy to ride. You don't have to put your feet down. You can carry more cargo, all sorts of things. So I'm really liking this one. In terms of specs, now it does have to meet Australian laws, which have more restrictive, more similar to Europe style e-bike laws, but it has a very powerful Ananda mid-drive motor. Ananda is sort of like a competitor to Bafang, I would say. They're not as widespread, but I would say that they're probably on a similar level in terms of production capabilities. We've actually toured both of their factories, so having been inside of both, I can tell you they're both pretty high end Chinese motor makers. So they've got that Ananda mid-drive motor. It does have suspension in the rear. Like I said, it's got that super long, like tiller style handlebars. It's got a cool rear rack that pops off like a shopping cart, or like a shopping basket, I should say, so that you don't even need to bring a second basket. It just comes off with handles. So some really nice design thought put into this, but it's not cheap. It's priced at somewhere around 4,000 US. I think it's like almost 6,000 Australian. Though they just launched it now, and it's got a launch promotion that brings the price down to about $3,000 US. So certainly, better. It's nice to have those launch promotions, but if you compare this to what we're used to in North America with things like, the most widely known trike is the Electrek XP trike, or XP trike 2 now, which is at $1,500. So, you're talking about something that's twice the price, though you're getting certainly more features here, more adjustability, more accessibility, suspension, mid-drive motor. There's a lot going on here that's going to bump the price up here. I left out the mag wheels. Those are pretty nice as well, so you never have to deal with broken spokes or spoke adjustment. You also can't fix them, so if you ever wreck it, like, your wheels toast. But as long as you're not going nuts here with this thing, those wheels should basically last you as long as you have the bike. So in my opinion, just like a really cool design, and something that we don't really see that often in North America. Seth, I feel like this type of semi-recumbent trike, like, it's just not so common, right? I think you're still on mute there, Seth.
Yep, sorry about that. Got a little bit of a cough, so I'm trying to keep it muted. Yeah, I don't think I've seen any trike like this ever. Immediately it kind of, like you say, it kind of sounds or looks a little bit like a recumbent mixed, but also it's almost like a little bit mobility scooter as well. Like it with that lower seat, um, the laid back a little bit more. It reminds me, and this is kind of the idea of these trikes is that it makes it easier for older folks who may not be able to ride a regular bike, or even in this case may not even be able to ride a regular trike. This makes it even more accessible to them. They're leaning back. um, you know it, I don't think you said if it has a throttle or not. I don't think it does.
I don't think it does, but I'm sure that it could be outfitted with one if you really wanted. The nice thing about those Chinese motors, even the mid drives, is they often have an option for it, even if
Right.
it's not a stock feature.
Yeah, I mean, I've been advocating for trikes as a replacement for early mobility scooter usage for a while. And this guy, that if you're watching the show here, this older gentleman has it probably in the lowest gear, I would say, because he's doing about the same RPMs as the wheels with his legs. So, if you're still able to pedal, you're probably not going much faster than a mobility scooter on this thing. So in a lot of ways, this is a mobility scooter replacement for those who, want to get some exercise. So I think that's fantastic. I think, if we can pull some people off of mobility scooters and get their legs going, that's a big win. And the mobility scooters are quite expensive, and obviously they can be paid for by um, Medicaid or Medicare or whatever. Um, I wonder if you could justify one of these in the same way as a mobility scooter. I think that would be a fantastic way to acquire a bike like this, even if it's $3,000 or $4,000.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a great use case for it. And even if, someone is past the point where they're able to pedal and, you have to use it with throttle only, I mean, that's just going to be so much better than a mobility scooter in terms of getting around, rolling over obstacles, and probably more fun too.
Yeah, and you can take it, to the bike. Like I don't think people on the in the bike path particularly enjoy seeing a mobility scooter, but seeing this thing would be a little bit less. I don't want to say off-putting, but it would be less of a surprise for the bikers in the bike path.
Yeah, no one wants to be that person that's like yelling at grandpa to get out of the bike lane, but we're all
Exactly.
thinking
Right.
it.
Yeah, you want to go fast. All right, let's move on. Speaking of going fast, Rad Power Bikes files for bankruptcy, hoping to sell the company. It's going fast. If anybody wants to buy one.
Yeah, I learned my mistake from an episode or two ago of putting a story like this first, so I kept this out of the first spot for the downer because this is very much a downer story. We're still watching Rad Power Bikes. A couple of months ago, we reported on how they sent out their warn notice in the state of Washington, which basically said that they had about 2 months left until they foresaw a closure unless they can find a buyer. That put them closing at around, I believe, January 9th, if I'm not mistaken. And as far as we know, there has not been an 11th hour buyer that's come in yet. Now, we still have about a week left here, but from what we can see, the company is projected to close around that time, unless there's any news before then. Now we do know that they already filed for bankruptcy. I think it was a week or two ago, but that was a step along the way that basically allowed them to continue operating while shedding some of their immediate debt and financial liabilities. We often think of a bankruptcy as like that's it, the company's over, but legally speaking, that's not the idea of a bankruptcy. It's not to end a company; it's to try and save a company. And so, they took that step already to try and buy themselves more time, and now we're looking at what could potentially be, unfortunately, the end of the road here, which there's a lot of sort of blame to go around here if we do get to the point where there's a post-mortem to be done. It will be a fascinating and sad occasion to do it, but it's there's a lot of reasons that come into here. Some of these affected everybody. There was the supply chain crunch. There was overstock issues. Everyone had to deal with that. But I think that a lot of people would agree that Rad ran into its own interesting issue just coming out of the pandemic years when it tried to go more upmarket as a way to avoid competing directly against a lot of the budget companies that were starting to come into the space it was in like the $1,200 to $1,500 budget bike space. And it doesn't appear that Rad ever really managed to stick that landing. Now they did come out with nicer bikes, their plus line of bikes, but they were charging prices that were up to $2,500 for bikes that were nicer than their original $1,500 bikes, but probably not $1,000 nicer. And so between the huge workforce, keeping a payroll of hundreds and hundreds of people, at one point I think over 1,000 employees, between having institutional investors come in and inject a lot of money into the company, but look for a return on that money fairly quickly, as well as probably replacing Mike Radenbaugh, the original CEO and founder, with other more theoretically experienced CEOs, but perhaps people that didn't quite understand the bike industry the way that Mike, the original CEO, did. There's a lot of factors here, but the long and the short of it is that the company does appear to be headed for their swan song here in the next week, which, as someone who's covered this industry for a long, long time, it's just a really sad occasion because Rad was so pivotal in getting so many people on e-bikes. There's, I think, close to 700,000 Rad bikes out there, most of them in the US, but also in many other countries. They were in Canada and Europe. And their goal from the beginning, I think their motto was democratizing e-bikes. It was bringing them to the masses at a time when e-bikes were more expensive. And they certainly did that. But in the years since, there have been many other companies that have stepped into that same space, and Rad just was not able to continue to compete uh, under all of those same conditions. So to me, this is a really sad occasion. I know I'm like really nostalgic, and for me, like, because I've just watched this for so long, it's like, it's like watching a sad movie ending. And so it's just really kind of heartbreaking for me. I don't know why I'm like so emotional over this, but I am.
Yeah, I get it too. I mean, we covered Rad for years and years, and they were kind of the leader. And Rad Runner came out, and we are like, "Hey, there's some innovation happening. We're loving this stuff." And then I think we were also like when the higher end stuff started coming out, we were like, this may be concerning here because I don't think anybody wants to spend $3,000 on a slightly upgraded uh, bike. Like this doesn't seem right. And I believe that was at the point that they replaced the founder, um, Mike, with some other folks. And I think the lesson here is like maybe the creditor and the growth thing was, don't take investment from people who perhaps want to, you know, have a very serious profit motive. Um, perhaps Mike could have taken a little bit less money and grown the company a little slower. Um, you know, like obviously the competition with the drop ship bikes. We see like this is if you're watching, we're looking at an updated Rad Runner Plus. Is that right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and
It's the Red Runner Max, actually, I think.
Max, and fantastic bike, has all the extras, but like at $3,000, like you can get a bike for half that price with 95% of the features, and which is it's frustrating because like everybody knows that like it's not that Rad was they just priced themselves into a crazy place where I think I even wrote Mike specifically when the prices came out, and I was like, you can't do that. Like you can't, nobody's going to buy this bike at this price. And he didn't they drop the price like $200 or something?
Yeah, like a day later.
Yeah. So like I don't know who was doing the math, what MBAs they got to do the pricing, but it didn't make sense. And then that was kind of like the beginning of the end, I think. Um,
Yeah. And I think that's really the key there, because for me, like when you compare Rad to other companies, because Rad was really one of the first. Now they were not the first e-bike company by any means, but they were one of the first to really scale. And so they became the largest in the country very quickly. When you compare them to other companies, like Electrek is probably the best comparison here. They went through a lot of the same obstacles, but they just approached them differently. Rad scaled up significantly, especially the workforce, whereas Electrek did more with fewer people. Rad tried to add, extra features and all sorts of things, that I think, they added interesting advantages to certain riders, but they were just unnecessary to the large community. Whereas companies like Electrek offered a bike that does, 80 to 90% of what most people need. And that was enough to gather 80 to 90% of the market, that sort of thing. So, I think that perhaps Rad just came in with the wrong perspective, and like you were saying, with the wrong price to fit the value they were offering. They stopped being the extreme value company that they were in the beginning, and they started being an all right company, in that they offered all right value, not the extreme value they once did.
yeah, and like I guess there's probably some execution things, like they were trying to kind of turn into a Pedigo type situation where they owned their stores, but they had physical presences. That may have been a good strategy at some point, but like I don't know that that was the way to go in the end. I think that might have been I don't the returns on the bike shop stuff is so hard to get, and hiring people and it just doesn't scale the way that bike manufacturing does. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's a lesson to learn from for all these other bike companies out there. Electric being the big one. Maybe focus on your strength, which is delivering value bike e-bikes, and don't don't change up the system too much unless you've got a really good plan. But sad day for all of us here, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And unfortunately, a little more to come in the next week.
Yep. All right, let's move on. After 10,000 miles, here's what happened to this electric bike.
This is a fascinating look because we rarely get a chance to see e-bikes with such high mileage. We do e-bike reviews here, and there are several places that do e-bike reviews, and we often get to do, 20, 30, 50, sometimes 100 miles, but rarely this kind of high mileage. And so, while I was scrolling Reddit, actually, I found someone that took their Ride One Up Prodigy V2 for 10,000 miles. They recently ticked right over the 10,000 mile mark. That's about 16,000 kilometers. And they shared a fascinating look at what goes into a bike that has that high of mileage. So some of the interesting things here are, of course, you're going to have costs associated with maintenance, right? So in this case, they said that they had to replace the chain 3 times. This is a mid-drive e-bike, so it will go through chains. If it's a hub motor bike, as long as you oil it, you can probably last 10,000 miles on a chain. Um, so 3 chains, 2 sets of brake pads, and they replaced the tires once. So they're still on their second set of tires, and 1 cassette. So they said that the total for all of that was $295 US, which 10,000 miles, that's pretty good, I would say. Now, the bike itself, they bought for $1,600. I think that was a pretty good sale at the time. Right now, it's more like 1,800 or so. But if you look at the calculations here, that brings it into somewhere between 17 to 19 cents per mile, if you're whether or not you're including the maintenance in with the cost of the bike. And that is significantly below the national average of somewhere between 60 to 80 cents per mile for car travel, depending, if you go with like the IRS number or the AAA number, or whatever. So you're looking at, something that's around 4 times cheaper than cars if you just look at it on a dollar per mile basis. And remember, this bike is still going strong. Like this isn't the end of the bike either. He just recently crossed 10,000 miles and shared this data with us. The other thing to note is that the battery still seems to be doing well. Generally, we consider a lithium ion battery at end of life when it reaches around 80% of its original capacity. The owner said that it still hasn't reached as low as 80% of its capacity. At that point, the battery is not dead, but it's usually significantly weaker. And that, like, if you're trying to climb hills or when you're going, faster and you're using significant power, it will drain much more quickly. That's why, we generally consider that as like the benchmark, the 80%. But to me, this is just a really interesting chance to get a deeper look into what happens after so many miles on a bike. And I think that the take home here is that you don't need to spend, many thousands of dollars. Like we talk about, recent molars, great bikes, turn, fantastic bikes, but $6,000-7,000, like very expensive. So this was a $1,600 bike. Now, admittedly, I think its value is higher than that. It's got a really nice Broza motor. It's a very well designed bike. So I would call this probably like fair value. It'd be closer to 2,000, but still, this bike has held up incredibly well. Frame and fork are still fine. It's just consumables that we've gone through here. But compare that to an Amazon special. We like to talk about like Amazon or eBay bikes that you'll find in the $500-600 range, or even $1,000 bike. Like one of my favorite budget bikes that I recommend to people is the Electrek XP4. And it's a great bike, but at 10,000 miles, I think it's going to be more worse for wear. Like I'm sure there are XPs out there with 10,000 miles on them, but it's just, those bikes aren't designed for that kind of extreme mileage on the longer end of the spectrum for most of the bikes. Now, again, bell curve, you're going to have some that get there. And also, I'm not sure that most riders ever intend to get there. When I was doing, more serious commuting, I was probably only doing somewhere around 3,000 miles a year kind of thing. So, it would take me a while to get there on any one bike. Now my commute is from my bedroom to my spare bedroom / home office, so I don't get the kind of mileage I used to. But this is some serious mileage for bikes. So I think this is just a really cool look into what it takes to get there, what that means in terms of cost on the bike, and how that compares to either a super expensive bike or a super budget bike. So I'm really glad that we got a chance to look into this based on someone sharing that kind of data with us.
Yeah, so I have one, like I'm a little skeptical because I had a Broza motor on my favorite e-bike, and I think Broza motors are probably one of the best experience motors, but they do have a internal belt drive, and 10,000 miles on an internal belt so I live, it's very cold here. There's lots of snow. So like the belt is going through a lot of temperature changes. Maybe this person is in a warmer climate, but my understanding is that the Broza belts wear out after a certain amount of time. But it sounds like he was doing a lot more per day. Maybe it's a actual years thing versus miles thing with the belts. But everything else checks out to me. But I'm a little skeptical of the Broza motor situation.
If it wasn't your Broza several years earlier in like the
Yeah,
model lines, so maybe things have changed in the
2017.
last.
Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly possible. And was this a chain it's a chain, right? I
So
think.
his was a chain. Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually available, this model, in both a belt and a chain. I would prefer the belt one myself, but for people with hills and that sort of thing, I definitely get the desire for the chain one, because you just get a much wider gear ratio.
Did it say where he was?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, I think good bikes are going to last something like 10,000 miles if treated properly. And, obviously if you're hitting bumps and jumping stuff, you're not going to last as long, but taken care of, 10,000 miles seems like a reasonable amount of time. And like, I'm talking smack about Brose's belt, but like, it's probably my favorite experience type of e-bike motor. So those are 10,000 enjoyable miles, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's move on here. We've been lied to. Electric bike motors can do regen, at least with this genius trick.
This is one of the most fascinating advances in e-bike tech I have seen probably in my like decade and a half or so of covering this. I think so. Anyone who's sort of followed bikes for a while will know that nothing's really changed in motors for a long time, right? Like the hub motors that were on the first e-bikes 30 years ago are basically fairly similar to what we have today. Um, and when it comes to regen specifically, there's always only been one way to do regen. It was to use a heavier direct drive motor, type of hub motor. Now, those were common 5, 10 years ago, but you just almost never see them today. Pretty much everyone uses a geared hub motor, so they're smaller, they're more efficient, but because they have those gears in there and it freewheels, you can't do regen. So that's always been the understanding. If you have a hub motor, certainly a geared motor, you can't do regen. But it turns out that that isn't exactly true, at least not if motors were designed slightly differently. And it took a very clever engineer who had never actually ridden an electric bicycle before to discover that. I was talking to the guy, and what he explained was that the issue is that the where the disc rotor is placed on the motor has just been in the wrong spot. So it's always been on the shell because the hub has always been treated like a conventional bicycle hub. So you just mount the disc rotor for the disc brakes on the shell, and then that's how you brake the wheel, or how you slow the wheel down. But what these guys did is that they decided to instead mount the disc rotor not to the shell of the hub motor, but to the plate on the inside that carries those three planetary gears. And so what that means suddenly is that you're not stopping the motor shell, you're stopping basically the gear mechanism on the inside. You're stopping the inner part of the motor. And that creates a clutch, which has always been missing from these motors. So the brakes actually work the same way. You pull the brake lever on the handlebars. These are hydraulic brakes, so the fluid goes down, it pinches that caliper. But now what's happening is as it pinches that caliper, the motor senses that the caliper is moving at a different speed. It starts turning the motor into a generator, which basically causes regenerative braking. The motor starts slowing down, and if it's slows so much, like if it gives so much regenerative braking that the caliper wants to come to a stop, then it knows that that's too much, so it lets off, and it's almost like anti-lock braking a little bit in that sense. And if you pull harder on the brakes, and it knows and it sees like, all right, now it's starting to lock up, it knows it needs to give more regenerative braking. So the harder you pull on that brake lever, just like normal physical brakes, the more regenerative braking you get. There's no extra sensors. There's no like backwards throttle. There's no extra button. It literally uses all the same system from normal bicycle brakes. The only difference is that the motor is built slightly differently. The disc is mounted not to the shell, but to the plate that carries the three planetary gears. And it's fascinating because like the answer's been there for decades. Like it's been possible. No one thought of it until this one guy that had never ridden an e-bike before, but just wanted to like work on solving like motor problems. And he just picked this up one day and was like, huh, they said you can't do regen. Let me see why not. And he thought about it differently. Like he just took a totally different idea and he solved it. And it's fascinating. So these guys, I should mention that the company is called Charge, and now they are basically uh, coming to market with this. Now they don't build it themselves. They basically invented this, and so they're marketing it to electric bike companies, OEMs that want to put this on their e-bikes so that you can finally have regenerative braking in a normal geared motor without any extra components, no extra sensors, no extra anything. You basically just need to build the motor slightly differently the way they've designed it and then use their controller. So I'm really hopeful that this is something that's going to enter the industry and we're going to start seeing this on more bikes because I rode it myself. I tested this out a few weeks ago, and it's kind of wild. Like you don't even realize it's working because it doesn't feel any different, right? Like I mean, it's working, but you don't realize that it's working differently than normal physical brakes, I should say, because the brakes feel the same. You pull the brake lever, and the harder you pull it, the more braking power you get. What you don't realize is that it's just not coming from friction anymore. It's coming from the motor working as a generator. And then, of course, you get the added benefit that you don't really need to replace your brake pads anymore because they're only doing a small amount of braking. That they are squeezing that caliper, but it's more just to let the motor know when you want to brake. All the power is coming from regeneration. So it like blew my mind, and it took me a little while to like when I first saw it. They kind of like walked me through it, and I have an engineering background. Like my first degree is mechanical engineering, and it took me a bit to be like, okay, wait, so how are these gears turning? Like, why? How is this possible? No one's ever done this before, and until it clicked, and it was like, wow, this is just like a paradigm shift for motor design. So this is one of the cooler things I've seen in a while.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like the way to explain it is that it's kind of cutting off before you have the gears. Like it's hitting the mechanical uh, energy. It's gathering the mechanical energy before it goes through the gears. Is that right? Or
Well, it's not that it's before it goes to the gears. It's that so the issue was always that because a geared motor freewheels and
Mhm.
like there's no resistance when you're not powering it,
Right?
there was never a way to back drive it. Like you can never actually turn the the innards of the motor because it was freewheeling. So what
Hmm.
they did was, because the disc is now mounted to the innards of the motor to those planetary gears,
Right.
you can basically lock those up and you stop it from freewheeling by squeezing the disc, so that your brake pads lock up the motor on the inside. And when you lock it up, now you're able to do that regenerative braking because it's no longer freewheeling.
Oh, got it.
But but it allows you to still freewheel if you want. You just don't squeeze the brakes. So
Right.
that was always the downside, is that like, yeah, you get freewheeling. That's why every company has switched to geared motors instead of direct drive motors. But there's no way to like lock up the inner of the motor to remove the freewheeling without some complicated clutch. And no one's going to start adding like a clutch like you have on a motorcycle to a bicycle.
Right.
So this becomes your clutch basically. Like that's what it is. I mean, you're basically creating a clutch for the innards of the motor. You're just cleverly doing it with the stuff that already sits on the bicycle itself.
Right. Well, that's pretty cool. Hopefully, this makes it to a bunch of motors pretty quickly. It's always nice. I like people are always like, "Eh, it doesn't really generate that much electricity," and that's true. Bikes, there's overhead, and it's not going to really charge your battery too much unless you're going down a big mountain. But I think the big thing with regenerative braking is that you don't have to replace the pads nearly as often.
Yeah, definitely. And also, it depends where you live. If you're in a super hilly area, you do get a little more out of it. If you're in a flat area, less.
Yeah.
I usually got somewhere in the high single digits when I was riding around with a direct drive motor years ago
Hmm.
on fairly flat ground. I've heard of people that are in really hilly areas getting like teens sometimes, maybe 20% if it's really hilly. But yeah, I mean, I think like you said, the bigger issue is that you're saving brake pads and maintenance, not just the extra power. But hey, like if you told me how would you like your battery to be 10% bigger for free, it's like, yeah, I'll take
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. 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 Great news. Glad to hear that. Innovation happening. Love to see that. All right, let's
Definitely.
move on. New California law will target the parents of child e-bike riders. Uh-oh.
Yeah. So there are several new e-bike laws that just came into effect on January 1st of this year. The biggest one I would say is this one, where basically for minors who commit offenses on bikes, now the parents can be legally cited for the kid's infraction. And before, this was sort of like, it varied from jurisdiction. Some started doing this, some didn't. It was a bit of a gray area, but now it's like on the books that parents be aware. Like if your kid, blows a red light, you can get the ticket, kind of thing. Um, whether or not that's fair, I mean, we can have a whole discussion about that, but it's a fascinating way to target the I don't know if I would say the majority of infractions. I don't know if under 18-year-olds are committing the majority or not, but certainly a large amount of e-bike riding infractions are coming from younger riders, ones that either haven't learned the rules of the road or are young enough to say like, I don't care. That doesn't concern me. Like if I don't stop at the red light, you better stop for me, kind of thing. So that's an interesting one in and of itself. There are a few other things here that California's instituting. There's some new like lighting requirements in terms of requiring rear reflector and LED light. I think most e-bikes these days pretty much come with a rear light anyway, but now companies are going to have to make sure they do. We still do see some e-bikes that don't come with them. And there's some new wording in the law to more clearly differentiate Suron and Talaria type light electric dirt bikes as what they're referring to as e-motos, and make them, their own off-road class of vehicle as well, and make it more clearly defined that these are not, road going motorcycles. So several smaller things, but I think the biggest one here is the impact that the new like minor infraction law will have on parents of kids, because it's just so common these days for kids to say like, "Hey, mom, dad, can you get me an e-bike?" And they do, because they're great tools. We're not saying they're not. Like, they're great for kids. Like, it's a great way for kids to get outside, ride together, be independent, get to school. But there's a lot of rule breaking going on as well. So for kids who are riding on public roads, uh, causing issues or breaking traffic laws, now it's the parents who could potentially pay for it, quite literally. How do you feel about that, Seth, as the father of two teenagers?
A little scary, but I guess somebody's got to pay the bills, right? Like, uh, I would imagine that some parents are like, "Yeah, do whatever you want. Like, it's not your, if you get in trouble, that's on you." But at the same time, like, we're trying to we're trying to assign some blame, and we're trying to get some, um, responsibility happening. I guess it makes sense. I don't know. Like, hey, if I have to pay your speeding ticket or you're running a red light ticket, I'm gonna take your bike from you. Um, Maybe that makes sense. I don't know. I don't like. I kind of feel like assigning the ticket to the kid would be much worse. They have to pay. They have to pay the fine. They have to get their bike impounded. I don't know why the parents are on the hook here unless they're doing something crazy.
Yeah, a parent would say that.
Yep.
I mean, look, I get it. I think the goal is to better encourage parents, A, to know what's going on, because unfortunately, I think a lot of them are kind of oblivious, and B, potentially hand down the punishment that the cops might not be able to, like,
Yeah.
um, I think there are a lot of kids out there that are a little more worried about, what the parents are going to do than what the cops are going to do. Like, cops aren't going to throw them in jail, but the parents can, ground them, take away whatever their vice is, that sort of thing. So I don't know. I can see some good here. Like,
Yeah.
and I've always been a person that says like, let's go more in the direction of enforcement, and not like uh penalizing e-bikes themselves, or lowering speed limits, that sort of thing. So I see this as a great way to say like, all right, we all accept e-bikes are good, let's have more of them, let's use them, but let's make sure that like we're also following the rules. And to me, this is a great way to prevent what's happening like in New York City, where they start putting 15-mile-an-hour speed limits and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's certainly not a great alternative. I guess what I would imagine being the best case scenario is like a shared responsibility. Um, Clearly to go after the parents, like going after the kids hasn't been working. Um, I don't know what that looks like. Like, you can't, like, if I got, if my son got a $50 ticket for running a stop sign, he would have to pay it. If if I got that ticket for $50, I would make him pay for it. I would obviously be pissed, but I would be pissed in either case. I don't know. I don't know what the scenario is that would make it any different. But you know, clearly they're grasping at some straws here. So maybe this works. I don't know.
Yeah, to be continued. We'll see what
Yep,
happens.
we'll cover the new California law that is the next week. So we'll see what they have. This will actually probably cause some law breaking. The Talaria Komodo launched as a new 65 mile per hour electric dirt bike. Of course, my son is a big Sir Ron, Talaria, E-Ride Pro, all the other uh, dirt bike fan. And he's been telling me about the Komodo for a long time. Micah, you're a little bit behind The Komodo's been on his mind for a couple weeks now. So let's hear about the Komodo.
So yeah, the Komodo is I mean this is certainly like Saran class, but this is certainly more powerful than a typical what you think of like a Saran Light Bee or like some of the more entry level Talaria, Erad Pro, etc. This is a 105 kilometer per hour. It's about 65 mile per hour electric dirt bike. And the good thing about this one is that it really is targeted towards dirt riders. I mean, the suspension setup, it's I think 250 millimeter travel in the front, 350 in the rear. Obviously, dirt bike tires. I mean, this one is set up for like jump parks, for motocross tracks, that sort of thing. This is not like the Surons that come with street tires that are obviously meant for kids to ride to school. So this is very much a like I want to do some dirt biking type of bike here. It's also got a much bigger battery than we're used to seeing on more of like an entry level Suron. This one is around 4.5 kilowatt hours. So this is on par with light electric motorcycles like we see from Rivid, or if you guys remember the Sondor's Metacycle, this is a similar size battery, even slightly larger than that one. In fact, now this is a heavy bike; it's over 200 pounds. So this is not a high powered electric bicycle. I think the lowest power Surons are like 110, 120 pounds, something like that. So like you can kind of like lift it up on your hip and like muscle it into the back of a truck. But this one, like without a ramp, you're not lifting this thing up and putting it on the back of a truck kind of thing. So this is a significant step up from the more basic entry level models. But it does look like a lot of fun, and it looks pretty well made. Like you've got the inverted front forks, you've got that long travel, high performance suspension. This looks like certainly powerful enough to do just about anything you could want on it. I think it was about 35 kilowatts, if I'm not mistaken. More powerful than I need, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Um, I could definitely get myself hurt on on something like this. Oh, there it is, 32 kilowatts. So very, very powerful. This is not a beginner bike. This is not something that's like, oh, I've heard that like, all the kids are getting little e-motos. Maybe I'll get Johnny one. Like, no, this is a more professional, you take this to the track kind of bike. There are other Talarias for the like, I want my kid to run red lights kind of thing. This is not that one. So
That's the triple
but
X,
it's
I believe.
there you go. Yeah. So this is a really cool addition to the market, and I think it punches in that class of like the was it the Storm Bee was the higher Suron, and even potentially starting to scratch at things like the KTM Free Ride and some of the actual honest to goodness dirt bike companies. This
And
is
Stark
starting
Varg,
to. Yeah, I mean, this would be like the like slow cousin of the Stark Varg in more ways than one. But
right?
it's starting to get up into, yeah. I mean, the Stark is just like
Absurd.
just the engineering is like you just want to like get down on your knees and pay homage to whoever designed that thing. So but this is a very cool one, and compared to the Stark, it's a third of the price.
Yeah.
Certainly less than half of the price. I think it's around $6,000 if I'm not mistaken. There's $5,700, which I mean is pretty good for this, honestly. Like,
Yeah. Really
um,
good.
yeah, these aren't cheap bikes, especially at that power level. So I mean, Talaria's kind of knocked it out of the park here, I would say. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah. So I'm thinking the same thing. Obviously, my kid, this is not for my kid. But what I think about when I see this bike is like, okay, you can make a $6,000, sub $6,000 bike that goes highway speeds. Um, like, yes, it's got dirt bike tires, but like, just like Stark did, what if you put some you know, proper street tires on this, maybe made it, a little bit more street focused, and some turn signals perhaps, all the things that the highway you need, and homologate it. Obviously it's going to cost a little bit more to do that work, but like all of a sudden for $6,000, you got a pretty good, you're going up against like a zero FXE kind of world, And this with this huge battery is going to have some pretty okay range for urban commuting. Um, Obviously, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's got plenty of acceleration, and probably too much. I mean, what this shows me is like, as an exercise, like there is a $5,000 street bike, light, but as long as um, you know, you have to sell this to adults and you have to homologate it and it has to be, you know, street legal, but it can be done. Like you can have a pretty awesome e-bike for the streets, um, a light electric motorcycle for $5,000. Like that's just there. They just have to do
Yeah.
the homologation work.
Yeah. And there's, it's a little more complicated than they just have to do it. But yeah, I mean
Yeah.
the ability is there, the manufacturing's there, the economies of scale at this point are there with so many of these things being built. I mean, these are being pumped out of these factories. So we're at the point where there's no reason for these to be unobtainably expensive anymore.
hmm Yeah, it's a little frustrating because if you want to get a legal electric motorcycle, you're looking at a kind of like a $10,000 price tag, except for the smaller ones. And obviously, Livewire's had some really good sales lately, and um, there are some, like, I don't think we've heard from, is it CNC or CSC?
CSC, yeah.
Yeah,
They haven't really had any new models in terms of the electrics in a couple of years, but they've had some. They continue to have good prices on the ones that they have. They've got a couple scooters, and I don't think they offer their full size motorcycle anymore, but they've got a couple of good sized scooters.
yeah. So I mean, it's just like the idea that you can get an electric motorcycle that goes highway speeds for 55 hundred $6,000. Like that's attainable, and it also looks awesome, and also it can go off road. Like I feel like we're close to that. Let's get this thing across the finish line.
Definitely.
All right, let's move on. Last story, the Bow M2 review, the premium e-scooter, unlike anything I've tested before.
This is a fascinating scooter because it is fundamentally very differently designed and built. Now, this is a standing electric scooter, so it's like the Razor style. This is not a seated scooter like a Vespa, but it uses unibody construction. So it's one giant piece of aluminum for the entire scooter, just one big like swooping piece. That means it doesn't fold, so you lose any folding ability, but it is much more rigid and stable. The other major design difference here that makes it feel so different is that it uses a steering damper. Basically, it returns the handlebars to neutral, but it also creates this like positive pressure so that like you would never get what we often call like speed wobbles or a tank slapper situation on a motorcycle where the handlebars and then the fork start oscillating at speed. So it just creates a much more stable setup. And it actually, this is the only scooter I've ever been able to ride without hands and feel pretty stable on it. Generally,
Oops, I think I lost your audio.
yeah, I think I'm back now.
Okay.
So basically, this is the only scooter I can ride hands free because it's not twitchy. Now, most scooters, they have a very short rake. They're not designed to be ridden hands free. It's not like a bicycle where as long as you're pedaling and you got the gyroscopic forces, then that wheel in the front is like a caster and it just sort of tracks. Scooters are not like that. But this one I can actually ride hands free, and that's a testament to how well that steering damper works. It still feels super strange because you just would never really do that. But the fact that it's physically possible speaks to how well designed this is. Now, this is a very expensive scooter. This is the Bow M2. The M2 is the higher power, higher performance version, and it's priced at, I think it's $2,400, if I'm not mistaken. So, this is like a premium, I would even call it potentially like a luxury scooter. You're not getting, for that amount of money on other scooters, you'd be getting much higher speeds. This one, it only goes 22 miles per hour, so it's not, crazy high performance. Now, it does have, I think, a 600 something watt hour battery, so it's fairly long range. But this is not a hot rod. This is intended to look good, perform well, be comfortable, be very stable. But it's definitely a more luxury oriented scooter. Now, this was designed by engineers who worked for McLaren and I think uh, Land Rover and a few other higher end companies. And so they come into this with that sort of design ethos. So they're not building razor scooters. They're not building like GoTrack's budget scooters. They're they're coming into this with a higher end sort of mindset. And so I get that this is not the scooter that you're going to get if you're on a budget. But from the engineering standpoint, to me, it's just a beautiful example of pushing the category forward with something that we haven't seen before. This unibody construction, so it's stiffer. It's the steering damper, so it's more stable. And honestly, it just looks really cool, in my opinion. Probably not the one I would go for if I could only have one scooter because of the value issue. But if you're someone who's willing to drop $2,500 on a scooter, you're going to get something that's a lot nicer and a lot more stable than you would get from basically any other scooter out there. So, not the highest value, but a really cool example of what is possible. And hats off to these guys for designing something unique and fairly innovative like this.
Yeah, looks amazing. Really cool idea, but like, why does it not like? I understand it has the unibody design, but like, it seems like you could still make it foldable. Especially that light seems to cut the unibody in half. Is that am
So
I
I
missing?
so I believe that the body goes under that light, so it still
Uh,
is like one piece there. Yeah, I mean,
so it adds
like if
rigidity, I'm sure, because there's always
yeah,
at that
exactly.
folding point. There's always like a little wobble or whatever.
Exactly. And there's just no wobble on this one. Like,
Right.
I sort of took that for granted before because it was just something you accepted with scooters. Like, yeah, the steering always wobbles because you've got like a 3 foot lever arm here.
Right.
But this one, like, there's no point for it to wobble about. There's no folding axis, so it's just one big L-shaped piece of aluminum, and that's why it feels so just like rock solid under you.
Yeah, and that's definitely something sorely needed in the scooter department, like something solid. Like, I can't even imagine letting go of, especially when your only touch point is your feet, like the bottoms of your feet. The fact that you can do that on this is pretty interesting. It would almost be turned into like an electric skateboard at that point, but with only two wheels, more like a whatever, what are those two-wheel skateboards? I can't remember what they're called, but um, kind of nuts that this can be built like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just wild. Like when you take your hands off and it just continues tracking nice and straight. It's the weirdest thing. It's just that like side to side balance, like you were saying. That's the tricky part because you never have to exercise that kind of balance. It's all like ankle movement. It really is
Right.
almost like skateboarding at that point. Um, which even then, like on a skateboard, you have the benefit of four wheels to be
Right.
stable. So it's a very odd sensation. But yeah, it's wild that the thing just tracks so nicely.
That's awesome. And what was the price on this? I know it's not cheap.
I think it's 2,400. Now they have the Bow M1 is a bit more affordable. I think it's under 2,000. Maybe it's like I don't know, 18, 19, something like that. For
Yeah.
so it's 1990 is the lower spec Bow M1. I think it's got a slightly smaller battery, maybe a bit slower than 22. But neither of these are budget scooters by any stretch of the
Right.
imagination.
Yeah. Oh, it's good to see these things. All right, let's go have a look in the comments. We got a very busy comment section today. So starting out the year, right? Easy E 13 says main thing I don't like about trikes is that you can't see over traffic. I would say that this particular trike is I would say recumbence is the thing that you can't really see over traffic. Most trikes are actually kind of high sitting um, situations, but certainly that's one of the problems of this kind of recumbent ish leaning back trike.
Yeah, definitely. And compared to like a very upright bike, even more so.
Yeah, and obviously they don't fit in your elevator. Their trikes are quite large. All
Yeah.
right, Carl in San Diego, Rad Power is a victim of their own race to the bottom. You need margin, not just volume. Uh, I mean, I guess that's on the one side of their model is that they had very inexpensive bikes, and there was a lot of competition on the very inexpensive part, which was a race to the bottom. But their move to the high end was also kind of part of the problem, or a big part of the problem.
Yeah. I mean, I think they were trying to do everything they could not to be a part of the race to the bottom, but that takes more than just raising prices, unfortunately.
Yeah. Extra Hero says, I just bought myself a secondhand rad wagon for Christmas and I'm loving it with its stunning orange color. Buying yourself something for Christmas, I love that. A rad wagon, even better. And I was thinking you were talking, but I didn't get to mention it. There's going to be a lot of inexpensive rad bikes out there as this bankruptcy goes through. I think we saw some at Best Buy, maybe, but it might be something to look out for if you're in the market for an expensive name brand bike that's going to have some sort of support out there.
Yeah, and probably on both ends, both the used and new markets, because a bunch of people are probably going to think, "Oh, I should sell it," because now, like, there's no customer service. So you might be able to pick up like a good, 6-month-old, year-old Rad for really good price. By the way, speaking of that orange color, I have the Rad Mission in the same color. I love that. That orange is so great. Like it's bright. I got a pannier bag that's the same orange, and I love that it's very like visible because I don't want to like ride around with a high vis vest on, but if my bike just happens to be bright, like, hey, I'm easier to spot.
Yep. Easy E13. Yes, Rad's prices pushed me away, especially with the size of the stock batteries. Yeah, and that was the other thing. The batteries, there was that warning that was pushed out, kind of nail in the coffin there. If you're a potential creditor and you're thinking about buying Rad's, what $10 million price on what used to be $1 billion company, you might hesitate that many of their batteries need to be replaced, or that at least there was that battery warning last time we talked about.
Yeah.
One thing we don't think about is how large the rad community is. We'll just depend on each other now. I mean, that's certainly the case. There's going to be a lot of parts out there. There's going to be a lot of replacements. There's going to be a lot of people who are familiar with how to fix rad bikes. So it's not like it would probably still be better to buy a rad power bike, especially at a discount, than a fly by night drop ship Chinese company. But it
Yeah.
might,
And even like most of the bike is still bicycle parts, right? Like,
right.
yeah, the motor controller. I mean, the motor even you can probably get, third party as well. But like the controller and things like that are a little trickier. But a lot of that stuff can be sourced from OEM suppliers.
Carl in San Diego says you could argue that Rad cannibalized the whole bike shop e-bike industry. Now we get a dead company and major bike manufacturers failing to focus on e-bikes. I don't know if I would take that particular angle. Obviously, Rad did try to work with bike company or e-bike shops or bike shops, and then eventually they became a bike shop. But I think there was everybody in the industry's kind of pushing the bike shops out of the picture. The Pedigo location in Croton, where I live, kind of pivoted a little bit to being a general e-bike shop, and even better, like they'll tell, like if you get a drop ship bike, any kind of drop ship e-bike, you can send it to this guy. He'll put it together. He'll make sure everything's really tight, really um, good, and charge you $150, something like that. I think that's a really good model. Like getting a bike shop ready bike from a drop ship company. I think that's kind of the future.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other thing is that there are a lot of direct to consumer companies like Aventon, especially, that have embraced bike shops, or if not like the typical Trek style shop, at least like the mom and pop local bike shops and of hundreds of independent dealers that way. So it's interesting because that was something that in the beginning I think Rad tried to avoid, and other companies since have really embraced that model as a way to get their bikes out there for people to try as well, which is such an important thing, especially for folks that are considering an e-bike for the first time and it's still a foreign idea to them.
Yep. All right, we got good morning from Nashville. Good morning from New York City. Good morning, everyone. Michael Spinzellis, I was never inspired enough to buy a Rad instead of Build, but I'm sorry to see them go. Yeah, I think it's sad for the whole industry. 10,000 miles on 2 sets of tires. They must have ridden on bald tires, much of that. Yeah.
Or they had, really good quality. I think I'm trying to remember what the Prodigy V2 came with. If it was, I don't think it might have been Pirelli's. I can't remember,
Oh,
but
really?
I think it came with decent tires to begin with. But yeah, I mean, that 5,000 is a lot for a bike tire.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, all right, he might have been pretty bald there near the end. Now that I think about it, even on a good tire, 5,000 is a lot.
Don't those have like Schwalbe's or something?
It might have been Schwabi. Yeah, I'll have to look it up. I forget now what they came with.
All right, Susan McLaughlin. Oh, nice to see some ladies out here. It's nice to see e-bikes lasting with proper maintenance instead of being treated like a disposable product to be run for a few years before winding up in the landfill. Yes, like let's make fewer disposable e-bikes. Let's make them last a long time, and you don't have to cycle through them. Although it is fun to get a new bike, so I don't know.
That shouldn't be the motivation to make
No,
them
you could trade
not
them down
last.
though. Like trade them in. Somebody else can enjoy them.
Yeah.
I am so thankful for e-bikes. Being disabled, I'm no longer able to afford car, and e-bikes help me maintain my independence at an affordable price. Not to mention that I can perform my own maintenance. Yes, yes, and yes. That's kind of the dream right there. I've got a couple thousand miles on a BBS 02 and more on a BBS HD. I fully expect both to go 10,000 miles with minimal maintenance. Those are the DIY e-bike from Bafang. Great
Yeah.
motors.
Yeah. I mean, you treat those well and they'll keep going. I mean, really, it's like probably chains and occasionally the cassette are really the maintenance issue there. And that's, and you treat a chain well, oil it, that sort of thing. It'll last a while before it stretches and wears out.
Yeah, and a lot of the e-bikes we get are, push a lot of power because those are interesting. But if you're just getting a normal e-bike that puts out 250 watts, you're not going to have as much chain or cassette damage than what we typically see because we're kind of pushing bikes a little further than most.
Yeah, I bet Michael's BBS HD is a little hard on his chains. And I
Yep.
mean, unless he's keeping it in a lower power level, which you don't get a BBS HD to keep it in level 1.
No, you do not. I guess the question always was, is regen worthwhile aside from braking down a long descent? Justin at Grin always said it was worthwhile. Trex said, no, it's not. I think we've landed on it's very valuable. If not for the extra 10% battery, it's certainly nice to have fewer brake pad changes. Micah, you should have explained the regen tech to Seth in a language he understands. It just works. What? I have an engineering
So,
degree too.
to be fair, I had the benefit of the guys who invented it explaining it to me with like a PowerPoint on the table there. And so I had a much better like easing me into it, and you're getting it secondhand through me. So I had a much higher odds of being able to get it right from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, I still don't quite fully understand, but I think I'm pretty close. And you have mechanical energy, like you're going to be able to turn that into electrical energy. I mean, even if you put one of those old style like
The
things on the
dynamos,
tire, that the lights that
yeah,
used to be powered by the tire thing, like you could
definitely.
do that if you wanted to. Like there's ways to turn mechanical energy into electrical energy. That's just a smart way to do it from the motor and the parts that you already have.
That's just one that
Uh,
the nerds dreamed up.
yep. All right. And Justin competes in long distance e-bike solar tours. So for him, every watt counts. Yeah, those are big optimization laboratories. I've heard the best you can do with regen is 10% more range, and that's the best case scenario that most people won't achieve. Yeah, 10% is 10%. Parents' control of their kid is limited. I don't see this parental responsibility accomplishing the road safety it's intended to. Yeah, sadly,
Just
I have to
depends
agree
on
with
the
that.
kid and the parent. Yeah.
Yeah. It's your kid, not the government responsibility. 100% with Seth, make the kids responsible. There you go. Mama ain't snitching on bro. I wonder if that's my son. Uh, Susan, wouldn't be cheaper to provide safer and separate bike infrastructure than to try to sue parents? Yes, let's do
That
that.
sounds nice.
Yeah, run for government, please. Schools are not going to take responsibility. It's not like most of the cities are suitable for bicycles. Yep. Cool bikes. Let's move on. Yo, I have a Rizzler e-bike. We have, I don't know if you've seen the Rizzler, but it's one of the new ones. It's got really small tires. It's a little bit safer. I mean, I don't know, safer, but a little bit lower power than, a lot of the new ones coming out. What is that from e-bike? There's like a electric bike company, I think it's called, that has a bunch of new e-bikes as of this month. So we'll have to take a look at some of those. Suron reinvents the 2008 Zero motorcycle nearly 20 years later. I mean, we're talking
I
about
think you meant Talaria there.
Talaria, and also not really. But
I mean, it's a little more advanced, I would say, but
yeah,
also Zero was ahead of their time with that. So you can look at it
yeah.
from both directions.
It would be interesting to hear more from Mike about his electric heavy equipment company, if it's not a conflict of interest. Do you want to just give us a brief on that real quick?
Yeah, so I have a electric earth moving equipment company that's called Nesher, and I guess that's why I don't cover Caterpillar or John Deere or anything like that. So I don't think there's much conflict of interest there unless I open up an e-bike company, at which point I'll let you guys know.
All right, and
I
what do
don't
you?
intend to do. I don't want to get into that game.
And I'm assuming you're selling some Chinese import stuff.
Yeah, so they're produced in China, but they're my own design that I've reworked a the basic foundation is a licensed German design, and then I worked with the engineers to make a lot of changes on the electrical side. So basically, it's designed to be something that's better suited for Western operators. It's safer, more ergonomic, more efficient, that sort of thing.
And didn't Fred buy one of those or a couple of those?
Yeah, Fred's got them in Canada. Yeah.
So we're gonna perhaps have a review of one of those some point soon.
Yeah, potentially. I'm not sure what his plans are, but I mean, he did send me a video of him moving a lot of snow, and that was pretty cool because I don't
Yeah.
get to do a lot of snow work.
No, not in Israel or Florida, I imagine.
Yeah.
All right, if my Talaria and Suron are any indication, I'll see the Komodo running against traffic on one wheel in groups of 20 or more. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it does more than that because it's really meant for like jump parks and that sort of thing. Hopefully it doesn't just turn into a red light runner.
Yeah. Look at Electrek.co. They have new e-bikes. Yeah, that's the Rizzler, comes from Electrek. And they've got some fun stuff coming. I mean, I think the new ones come out in March or April. My son obviously has sent me a bunch of links and requests, which I've denied in various ways. My 2019 Radwagon has regen, as Micah knows, but it didn't seem bothered when they took regen away the next year. So this is exciting. Or yeah, the 2019 had a single speed hub motor, which is fairly straightforward in making regen, right?
Yeah, those big direct drive motors. And yeah, I mean, it was cool as one of the last like big companies to have a regen option. But I guess, it's like we talked about, whether or not regen's important to you depends on A, whether you'd like the extra range, and B, whether like the saving of the brake pads and the maintenance is worth it. So to me, I think it's a cool feature, but it was sort of sad to see Rad go away from it on the Rad City, but that was a very heavy motor, that direct drive motor. Like when you pick up that bike, the rear end takes a while to come around.
Yeah. All right. I think we're talking about the scooter here. 22 miles per hour is plenty with small wheels over potholes. Yeah, it's something to think about. OVO Porsche reminding people that forgot and pretend not to know in 2026 that I think we might be on the wrong subject matter here. Oh, actually, Hero says he got matching orange pannier bags too. So you guys are twinsies. Best place to watch for Rad bikes on clearance. I think we saw some on Best Buy, but yeah, I'm sure they'll
I
be
don't
on
know that. I'll have to
9 to
check
5
Best Buy.
Toys when they hit. Just do a search on 9 to 5 Toys. You'll probably see some there. Happy New Year, fellas! Glad to still be with you. Happy New Year! All right.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to everyone. I've replaced the chain twice on the HD. So we're talking about the BBS HD from Bafang, which ran at 2,500 watts for about 1,000 miles. That's a lot of wattage to put through a chain. So
Yeah.
that's a super chain. I went to Rad's website and gave them my email to send updates and special offers. Hopefully that's where they'll drop the big discounts. Probably a good idea. I was just referencing Seth's Apple days with my "it just works" statement. Oh yeah, I have the 9 to 5
Wasn't
back.
a personal attack.
Right. I do have the other site on my shirt today. I have to sync up my laundry and podcast. And the final comment, Michael Franzelis, the first replaced chain was original to the bike, and I had many thousands of miles. Yeah, if you do it right, if you accelerate slow, and the BBS HD has a nice acceleration profile, and even and most people actually probably just do pedal assist. So I don't think the chain's definitely going to rip off. I know I had a Bafang Ultra that just, I was using it incorrectly, obviously, but changing gears going up a hill 25 miles per hour, your cassette's not going to last long. Neither is your chain.
Yeah, well, high-speed metal work.
Yep. Just melting stuff.
Oh, everything within reason.
Yep.
All right, I think that brings us to the end of the comments. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in, new and regular viewers and listeners both, as well as everyone who joined us in the comment section. It is always great having you guys. We will see you back here in another 2 weeks for the next episode of the Wheelie Podcast.